Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This time, we're tackling the Book of Ecclesiastes.
The whole thing. Wow, you weren't kidding when you said deep dive.
Nope, we're going all in. All its wisdom, poetry,
That touch of cynicism.
Exactly. And for everyone listening, get ready to unpack some serious ancient wisdom.
Yeah, we're talking about the big questions here. The meaning of life, purpose, the whole shebang.
And the author, probably King Solomon, had some pretty strong opinions on all that.
He did. I mean, the book starts off with a real bang, doesn't it? Meaningless.
Yeah.
Meaningless. Everything is meaningless.
Whoa, okay. Starting off strong. It's a little bleak, isn't it? Like, why bother doing anything if it's all going to disappear?
Well, it's not quite that simple. You see, that word meaningless, the Hebrew is hevel.
Hevel.
It means vapor or breath, too. So it's more about how fleeting things are.
Oh, I see. So it's not that life has no meaning. It's that the things we chase after.
The wealth, the power, all that, they don't last.
Like chasing after the wind. You can't ever really catch it.
Exactly. And it's interesting because the author, if it was Solomon, he would have had all that stuff.
Right. Wealth, power, wisdom, everything.
And yet he still came to the conclusion it was all kind of, meaningless.
That really makes you think, doesn't it? So if it's not about all those things, then what is it about? What does Ecclesiastes offer instead?
It's not a simple answer. It's more of a change in how you look at things.
Okay, so how should we be looking at things?
Well, it recognizes some tough realities. Death, the limits of what we can know, how unpredictable life is.
That's for sure. So, within all that, what are we supposed to do?
Find joy in the present, appreciate what you have, the simple gifts,
Like a nice meal or spending time with people you love.
Yeah, things like that. It's about focusing on the good that's here now.
I like that. It's so easy to get caught up in worrying about the future, and we forget to appreciate what we have right now.
And that's where wisdom comes in. Ecclesiastes is all about wisdom.
But not just knowing a bunch of facts, right?
Right. It's more like knowing how to live well, how to make good choices.
Practical wisdom.
Exactly. And the book gives a lot of practical advice about work, relationships, even how to handle money.
It's like a guide to life, seen through this lens of faith.
I think that's a good way to put it. It acknowledges that there's this divine order to things, even if we don't always get it.
That's a big one. I mean, life can feel so random sometimes.
It can, but Ecclesiastes is saying, hey, there's a bigger plan here, even when things seem unfair or bad things happen to good people.
So it's about trusting in that plan, even when we don't understand it.
That's a big part of it, yeah. Recognizing that God is in control.
A lot to think about there. What about you listening? Have you ever felt like you were chasing after the wind?
Or what do you think about this idea of a divine order? Does it make sense to you?
We'll be digging deeper into all of this as we continue our deep dive into Ecclesiastes. But for now, take some time to ponder these questions.
We'll pick up the conversation in part 2. Welcome back. It's great to be diving deeper into Ecclesiastes with you.
Me too. Last time we were talking about that whole chasing after the wind thing.
Yeah, how those worldly goals don't really satisfy us.
And this idea that there's a bigger plan, a divine order, even when things seem random.
So, for everyone listening, what are your thoughts so far? Anything sticking with you?
I think today we should talk about wisdom. Ecclesiastes seems to have a lot to say about that.
It does, and it's kind of interesting because it values wisdom but also questions it.
Yeah, there's that line, in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow.
It's like the more you know, the more you realize what's wrong with the world, the more it hurts.
So is it better to just not know? Stay ignorant and be happy?
Well, Ecclesiastes doesn't really say that. It's more about finding a balance.
Between knowledge and what? Humility.
Yeah, I think so. It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
And that maybe that's okay.
Right. It's like keep learning, but don't think you know everything.
So a healthy dose of skepticism.
Exactly. Always question things, test them out. Don't just accept what you're told.
Which brings us back to that faith element. Trusting in something bigger than ourselves.
Even when we don't understand everything. It's kind of a paradox, isn't it?
It is. So true wisdom involves letting go of control.
I think so. Accepting that there's a bigger picture, a purpose.
Even when life throws you a curveball.
Especially then, maybe. It's tough. I get it.
It is. Ecclesiastes doesn't shy away from that, though, does it? The pain, the unfairness.
Nope. It's pretty honest about the struggles.
But it does offer a glimmer of hope. This idea that there's still a plan.
Yeah, even in the midst of all that, there's still a light.
That reminds me of another thing Ecclesiastes talks about. Relationships.
Oh, yeah, those are important.
It seems to value them a lot, but also recognizes they can be tough.
Like that proverb, two are better than one, but a threefold cord is not easily broken. It's about strength in numbers, but also realizing relationships take work.
It's easy to romanticize them. They're not always perfect, are they?
Not always. What do you think, listeners? Have you experienced that tension in your own relationships?
The good and the bad.
Yeah, that mix of joy and potential for pain. How do you navigate that?
Because Ecclesiastes seems to say relationships are good, but
But they shouldn't be your everything.
right, there needs to be something deeper, more solid as your foundation.
Like your faith, your connection to God.
Which brings us to another big one. Pleasure.
Mm.
What does Ecclesiastes have to say about that?
A lot, actually. It talks about different kinds of pleasure, wealth, possessions, all that.
Even love and relationship.
Yeah, and it's not saying those things are bad,
Right.
but don't make them your main focus. Don't chase them above everything else.
Like that verse, eat, drink, and be merry, but.
There's more to it than that. It's about enjoying life.
Sure, within limits.
Right, within the boundaries of what God wants for us.
Finding that balance again.
Always that balance. Enjoy the good stuff, but don't let it become your whole world.
Because true happiness comes from somewhere else.
Yeah, from living a life that's aligned with God's plan.
That's powerful stuff. So for you listening, where does that resonate with you?
Where do you see those connections between what you do, what you love, and your faith?
We'll be exploring even more of this as we go on, but keep thinking about it.
Join us for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll tackle some of the toughest parts of Ecclesiastes.
Welcome back, everyone. This is it, the final part of our deep dive into Ecclesiastes.
I can't believe we've made it through the whole book.
I know, right? It's been quite a journey, a lot to think about.
Definitely. What about you listening? What's been on your mind during these past couple parts?
One thing that really stuck with me is how Ecclesiastes talks about time, how short life is.
Yeah, it's almost like a constant reminder, isn't it?
Like, hey, don't waste your time. There's that urgency in the book, I think.
There is. All those images, the sun setting, the body getting old, it makes you stop and think.
For sure. So we have to make our time count, right? Do something meaningful with it.
Exactly. Don't waste your energy on stuff that doesn't matter in the long run.
Focus on what has eternal value.
Yeah. And I think that ties into this idea of legacy, what we leave behind.
Ecclesiastes really wrestles with that, doesn't it?
It does. It asks, what do we really gain from all our hard work? Like, at the end of it all, what's left?
That's a good question. I mean, when you strip away all the stuff, the success, what defines a good life?
Ecclesiastes seems to say it's about making the world a better place, helping others, being kind,
Not about building some huge monument to yourself.
Right. It's about the impact we have on others.
What about you, listeners? What kind of legacy are you building? What will people remember you for?
It's worth thinking about, I think.
Definitely. And we can't forget that Ecclesiastes also deals with some tough stuff, like suffering.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't sugarcoat anything. It acknowledges the pain, the unfairness.
That bad things happen to good people.
And sometimes it feels like the bad guys win.
Exactly. So how do we reconcile that with believing in a loving God?
It's one of the oldest questions, isn't it? And I don't think Ecclesiastes gives us all the answers.
But it does say we don't see the whole picture.
Right. God's ways are higher than ours.
So maybe it's not about understanding everything. It's about trusting, even when it's hard.
Having faith that God is still good, even when things are bad.
That's a tough one. But that surrender thing we talked about earlier plays into this, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's realizing we're not in control, letting go and letting God be God.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things we should take away from Ecclesiastes?
Well, for me, it's about appreciating what we have, this gift of life.
Enjoying it, even with all the ups and downs.
Yes, and building our lives on something solid.
Something that will last.
Right, and remembering that we're not alone. God is with us through it all.
I like that. So for you listening, as you go about your day, think about what we've talked about.
Let the words of Ecclesiastes sink in. Let them guide you.
Remember, life is short. Savor each moment. Be wise. Trust in God.
And most importantly, keep seeking truth.
This deep dive may be over, but the journey of learning never ends. Thanks for joining us.